Welcome back to Red Pen Destiny. As the title suggests, we are about to cover MASH for our Why You Should Watch series. MASH is, of course, a classic 1970s American sitcom about the Korean War, a war hospital, to be specific. I will confess, I'm having trouble remembering everybody's name, but I do want to go through the main cast list. So hopefully I won't stumble too much here. Of course, there's Hawkeye Pierce, played by Alan Alda. He's probably my favorite lead character. He very much drives the show. He's very sarcastic and he's very well written. I think that's the Alan Alda and see, this is who I cannot remember the name of. The McIntyre, played by Wayne Rogers. Yeah, okay. He's who I couldn't remember. He's the other sort of main character, and they're both very sarcastic and kind of bounce off each other. And I would say they're the main characters, and everyone else is the surrounding characters. Then you have Hot Lips Houlihan and Major Burns, who cause many a problem amongst themselves and between everyone. By just being generally meddling. A lot like Hodges back when we did Dad's Army. Well, the limited amount of Dad's Army we did anyway. Definitely reminds me of Dad's Army MASH. I mean, it was kind of the American 1970s Army comedy. So I think that's probably why. And I don't know, maybe the attitudes are similar, but they're not that similar, really. They're quite different shows. And then you have Klinger, played by Jamie Farr, the man there in what is definitely a skirt and not a kilt, as it might suggest, who's constantly wearing women's clothing because he thinks it will make people think he's crazy and send him home. It's a joke which is not aged well, but I think it was all in good fun. But it's like it doesn't work, but he just dedicates himself to it. So like constantly throughout the show, he's just there, and nobody cares. They just all accept it and don't acknowledge it. And then you have the chaplain, John Patrick, who's played by George. He's played by a different person in the pilot. He's played by William Christopher for most of the show, and George Morgan in the pilot. That's interesting. He's probably the least interesting of these characters. He doesn't really have any like huge defining trait like the rest of them, but he's a good side character. Then we have Henry Blake, who's the lieutenant colonel, the man in charge. McLean Stevenson, he's played by. He's a bit of an idiot, and quite frankly, wouldn't get anywhere without his clerk, Radar, who's there on the bottom right to the left of Klinger. I think Radar is one of the best characters in the show, though. He's called Radar because he has very good hearing, so he'll hear things like before people. Like when the choppers come in with wounded, they usually have him say something before you hear them. So it's like what are you talking about? There's no choppers coming. Oh, there they are. Okay, and then they all spring into action and deal with whatever casualties are coming. I think the thing that I always remember about Radar is I'm not sure if it's in multiple episodes, but in one episode, he's very slowly taking spare parts from Jeeps. I think they're not off of Jeeps, but they're spare parts that were intended to go on a Jeep when one broke down. And he's very slowly mailing himself back a Jeep, one piece at a time. And it's very funny. Thing. Although I'm not sure how he was going to do the body. Like, that would have been difficult. But if you know anything about the original Jeeps, they would actually ship them in a box. And you can still buy a box full of Jeep parts and then put it together. So, but the body comes as one big piece. So you wouldn't be able to sneak that back. You might be able to sneak the tires back and everything, but the body is going to be the tricky part. But maybe he could just find an old body in a junkyard, and then he's got the rest of it in perfectly new condition. But yeah, I think that's just worth watching. And if you get into it, it's a long show. I think it was like 1972 to 1983. It's often remarked that it lasted quite a lot longer than the war, which only lasted 4 years. Um, but I guess it just fit into the 1970s very well, and it just continued to march on into the 80s. And it's quite lovable. It's not like laugh out loud funny all that much. I put Dad's Army way above MASH, but quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of options in the 1970s, so we're going with this. And this is nowhere near the worst. MASH is actually a show that I used to watch a while back. I don't really watch stuff without plot so much anymore, because their plot is pretty weak and it's very serialized, I suppose is the best word for it. But yeah, if you like American sitcoms, looking for something interesting and you've never watched MASH, give it a try. So next week we will be doing the band of the year, which is Van Halen. So we should have a lot to talk about there. I can go on about Van Halen for a while, I think. See you then.